In this video, we're discussing everything Jedi Power Battles, the development, release, reception, re-release, tips for the game itself, and tips for 100% completion. No time to waste, let's get right into it. Jedi Power Battles was originally released March 31st of 2000. The game was a collaboration between LucasArts and Lucasfilm, and I really miss LucasArts as a company. They were basically the game studio of my childhood. X-Wing, Dark Forces, Jedi Academy, Monkey Island, Full Throttle, Day of the Tentacle, they're all amazing, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The goal of Jedi Power Battles was to deliver a new action experience on the hype train of the recently released Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Star Wars never went away for us true believers, it never will go away, despite whatever bumps in the road we might hit. But the release of the first new movie in almost 2 decades reignited Star Wars fever across the world. The development team's vision was a co-op action-adventure game that combined classic platforming aspects as well as the hack-and-slash gameplay that fits playing as a Jedi so perfectly. Along with those original pitch ideas, there was mention of some light problem solving, but aside from one puzzle where you run through a room while changing the colors of energy walls, I think the puzzles mostly got scrapped. There's also a slight RPG aspect to leveling up each playable character, but that's a fairly streamlined mechanic that doesn't really change how the game unfolds or the play style feels. I swear as a kid that I read somewhere that this game was going to be a 4-player co-op. So much so that I went out, scraped together whatever little bit of money I could, and bought a multi-tap as well as 2 additional controllers for my PlayStation that were never used. I was determined to prove my younger self right when researching this video essay, 25 years later? But no, I must have made that part up. With the limited technology of the day, the developers had the ambitious goal of replicating the excitement of wielding a lightsaber and using the Force to take down the evil Separatist battle droids. I mentioned the technology being relatively limited compared to today, of course, and as the project got underway, the developers at LucasArts started to feel that too. The prequel trilogy is known for many things, one of the most exciting being the incredibly fluid, dynamic, and high adrenaline lightsaber battles. Duel of the Fates, the fight that sees Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn take on the newly introduced and incredibly delivered Darth Maul, is still my favorite bit of lightsaber action in the entirety of the franchise across all mediums, live action, animation, video games, I don't care, it is the best. Lucasfilm and LucasArts were never afraid to push boundaries and break through technological barriers. The animation team worked closely with designers to give each playable Jedi unique movements and a play feel that mirrored the character's persona on the screen. I was surprised to find, after playing the game again this past weekend for the first time in well over 20 years, that the different characters did have a fairly distinct feel. Not a night and day difference, but more than I expected them to have. Another challenge the game's creator faced was in having enough variety in the levels while still basing them all on the Phantom Menace locations. They wanted the different levels to have different gameplay experiences. They fell a bit short there. The levels don't feel too different at all. One may have a bit more jumping around than another, or a single gimmick tossed in like the rolling boulders on Tatooine. The only big standout level that is very different is when you're riding a stap in the streets of Naboo, and that level is incredibly tedious. Jedi Power Battles debuted on the original Sony PlayStation in March of 2000, less than a year after The Phantom Menace hit theaters. In November of that same year, the game was ported over to the Sega Dreamcast. It even had a Game Boy Advance port in 2001. Each time the game was ported, the design team tried to put a little bit more polish on it. The core of the game stayed the same, but the graphics were given slight improvements and the gameplay mechanics were tweaked slightly for balance and smoothness. Originally, the game featured 5 playable characters, all Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Qui-Gon Jinn being the most obvious. Mace Windu, Plo Koon, and Adi Gallia joined the fray. Fun fact, Mace Windu originally had a blue lightsaber since Samuel L. Jackson didn't talk George Lucas into the unique purple until he was to wield it in 2002's Attack of the Clones. Each playable character has unique combos, force powers, and specs like speed and strength. The 10 core levels follow, broadly, the events of the Phantom Menace. You do battle on Trade Federation ships in the swamps of Naboo, the cities of Naboo, Coruscant walkways and rooftops, and the deserts of Tatooine. The final climax is with, and I don't think I need a spoiler warning at this point, it's Darth Maul. The 2-player, not 4, Co-op was a ton of fun. Creating different combinations of the Jedi, some of these Jedis were just faces in a room at the time the game came out, kept the game feeling fresh on multiple playthroughs. Swapping out the playable character, leveling each one up, and finding all the collectibles and power-ups in each level made the relatively short game feel much longer, as replayability was very accessible. In its day, the critical reception for Jedi Power Battles was very mixed. Fans loved it. It had the Star Wars label on it, and after George Lucas released Episode 1 and breathed fresh life into the franchise, we were all excited. Fans appreciated its commitment to Star Wars lore and the attempt to make the player feel like part of the story. Just being able to play as a Jedi and hack your way through familiar enemies with a lightsaber was worth the purchase price. Even now, I'm pushing 40. I still felt that way with the recent remake. Critics who were probably much more objective criticized the game for its clunky controls, uneven difficulty, janky platforming sections, and graphical glitches. Despite the critics, fans spoke with their wallets and time. Jedi Power Battles was a successful release and earned a cult following. Let's jump ahead nearly 25 years. Lucasfilm Games teams up with Aspyr Media to remaster the game. The original release had maintained a fan base, nostalgia played no small part in that. The Phantom Menace was an entry point for many into the Star Wars universe, and even slightly older fans like myself remember the game fondly for all the hours spent on it. The gaming industry at large has embraced the remaster and re-release. It makes sense as a business move to get fresh profits on an old IP with limited development and art assets needed, but it also serves a fan's wish, giving them something they remember fondly. There's the added benefit of fans who missed out on it the first time around or weren't part of the fandom at that time, to grab a piece of gaming and Star Wars history to experience with their fresh eyes. The Star Wars prequel trilogy has been given renewed appreciation as younger audiences have found their way to it, and those at the exact right age during its initial run are working adults with expendable income. The internet and social media, along with the incredible Clone Wars animated series, have pumped so much more life into the prequels, they feel more popular now than ever. The remaster began in 2023. Aspyr is a studio known for high-quality remasters like Battlefront Classic Collection and porting the fan-favorite Knights of the Old Republic over to iOS. The Jedi Power Battles remaster was never intended to be a full rebuild, but a way to modernize the old favorite while holding on to the nostalgic charm, even if some of that charm is in the more clunky bits. The improvements in the remaster are pretty significant. The graphics were given a facelift without reanimating the entire thing. The biggest gameplay improvement to my experience was the modernized controls. The camera was also made more dynamic rather than fixed, which was intended to fix a lot of the game's platforming issues, and it does for the most part, though I found there's some new platforming issues created along with this update. A major addition was rumored to be online multiplayer functionality. I played this sitting with my buddies on the same couch. Those same friends now live scattered across the country, so being able to throw on a headset and slice up battle droids like we did 25 years ago would have been incredible. That capability was either abandoned or it was just a rumor to begin with. New playable characters were added as well. I had seen some reports that Ahsoka Tano and Kit Fisto were to be added, but they are not part of the game. Kit Fisto would fit the timeline, but Ahsoka definitely would not. Not that that should really matter for a game like this. You can now play as Darth Maul, which is awesome, or some of the other Episode 1 characters. Those who want to play as Korsh Panaka, you're in luck. The game was extensively playtested in the remaster process to find a more balanced difficulty curve. The original game had insane fluctuations level to level in its difficulty. It's also said that the design team reworked the enemy AI and boss battles to create a more engaging experience. I'm not sure how extensive this was or how bad the interactions were originally, but this game feels very old school even in the remaster. The movesets for each enemy are incredibly limited with very predictable loops, especially in the boss battles, which to me was part of the charm of playing a new version of something so old. Little additions were thrown in to give a bit of love to the legacy of the game, like concept art galleries. I also read rumors that DLC would be available, introducing characters from Star Wars Rebels and the Mandalorian series, but these are definitely not true. The remaster is a $20 digital download. I don't see Lucasfilm Games nickel and diming fans over time on a quick nostalgia hit hit. This video was written and recorded just days after the launch of the remastered Jedi Power Battles. I got to spend a solid amount of time with the game and absolutely fell into the nostalgia of it all. A flood of memories came along with it. I must not have been alone in this, since the reviews have been far more favorable this time around than during its original release. The updated visuals and modern controls top that list. Fans are very happy with the expanded playable character list and small gameplay comforts like all the levels being unlocked from the start. I got to spend a good amount of time with it over the weekend. I actually should have been reading, researching, and writing lore videos like I normally do, but I could not bring myself to stop playing and replaying the game. The graphics are definitely better, but not great. The sound loops are still basic and the platforming still a pain, but not as much as they were originally. The dynamic camera that was added fixes a lot of the movement perils, but it can be a hindrance at times. It can often push collectibles or enemies out of the playable area. Sometimes, if you find the right angle, you can sort of push the frame to where you need it to go. Other times, that collectible is gone until your next playthrough, when you remember to go at it from a wider or different angle so it doesn't get pushed off the screen. Then you have to wait for the enemies to come to you, or deflect the blaster bolts, or just ignore them and forego the points. The controls are much better, but the moves list in the options doesn't specify that a lot of the moves, namely the force powers, have to be unlocked, a detail that I forgot in the intervening 2+ decades. The enemies move in very predictable attack patterns, which usually makes things easier, but it also has this weird pitfall of their attack recharge time being the same as your character's hit recovery time. This can lead to loops of you being hit over and over and over, and there being nothing you can do about it. Luckily, the enemies usually change up their move and don't just juggle you with the same move over and over and over until you die. That same juggle annoyance can be used to your benefit. Fighting against Darth Maul, for example, I found a simple 2-button combo with Qui-Gon Jinn that meant that he couldn't fight back at any point. I was even able to hold him there when he was supposed to run away for the next phase of the fight, which let me stack up points to get the point-related achievements. If you care about achievements, or trophies, or whatever other platforms are calling them, you can easily 100% this game. There's not a huge difference between the easy and Jedi difficulty modes, so this would be my recommendation on how to get the most out of the game and to complete it fairly efficiently. Start on easy. Get familiar with the game again, learn the controls. Play through it from start to finish with your favorite Jedi to make sure that you have max life and max force powers by the end. You probably won't get many of the level score achievements, since easy mode has a lot less enemies overall, but you will learn the levels and find most of the collectibles. They're not all that well hidden. Then replay whatever level you want with each of the characters needed for their particular achievement. I personally just did the first one over and over and over. The ones needed are Plo Koon, Quarsh Panaka, Mace Windu, and Darth Maul. This next part is my biggest gripe with the game. When you want to play it on Jedi difficulty after easy, you have to wipe out your current game, meaning any characters that you've leveled are gone. It's barely more than a few hours to beat the whole thing, which will fully level your character, but it seemed like a big oversight with modern gaming consoles and computers. Once you get past that and you put the game on Jedi mode, rebeat it with your favorite Jedi, and you'll get most of the achievements along the way. You'll already have all the level completion ones, and you should get the majority of the points ones. There's only 2 levels that really gave me a hard time, and on the levels that do give you a hard time, there's usually a way where you can kind of game the system. Like in the first level when you're fighting the droid starfighter, if you're short of the, I believe, 24,000 points needed for the achievement, don't kill the boss. It'll go through its cycle, and it'll summon 2 battle droids. Kill them each for 100 points, repeat, repeat, repeat. Before too long, like literally 2-3 minutes, you'll have the points required to go on and get the achievement. The only other achievements to keep in mind that are easily missable, but again, it's not that big a deal since you have level select, is to make sure to use the Force to throw an enemy into the Sarlacc pit, and once you get that one, jump in it yourself and hit the checkpoint, done deal. A few other quick tips to keep in mind. While you're doing the jumping sections of the game, if you get hit, you fall straight down. It doesn't matter if you have maxed out health, you're the strongest Jedi you can be, and the weakest possible projectiles coming at you, you will fall straight down like a rock. This is the #1 way you're gonna die in this game. So use your distance force move or deflect blaster bolts back at the enemies before doing jumping sections. They also, as I said, have very predictable movement patterns, so if you just wait until they shoot and then then go, you're probably going to be fine. Enemies do have friendly fire. If you're going for the score achievements, make sure that the enemies don't kill each other since you don't get those points. If you're a bit overwhelmed, you're surrounded, or you're playing the survival mode, always have an enemy between you and a further out one, especially the droidicas. That way, they'll kill each other and cut the work in half for you. Also, if you ever feel overwhelmed, deflect. The block feature does have a bar that can technically overheat or max out or whatever you want to call it, but you'd have to try to get it to do that. The second you release the block, it cools down pretty much instantaneously. There's a generous window for the perfect deflect, and it can save you in tough spots. You can easily whittle down the enemies while taking very few hits on missing your timing. The only misstep I can see, aside from the one save game, was not releasing this game along with the 25th anniversary fever of the Phantom Menace. But for $20, this is an easy option for any Star Wars fans to spend some time in and love. The game wasn't technically good, but that did not stop me and many others from absolutely loving it. I was 14 when it came out and knew it was a bit of a mess, but I loved it just the same. I remember vividly sitting around with a tight group of friends, swapping out the two people playing as we all had our favorite Jedi to level up and master. We would laugh at the simple voice loops, the clunky movements, and Jar Jar's constant screaming. My good friend Mike, who is still one of my best friends to this day, was obsessed with finding every secret. And he would say, hey, I think there's a secret down there, and he would jump to his death constantly. But credit where credit's due, he was right a lot of the time. When this re-release hit, I couldn't play with him or his brother Nick, who is also still one of my closest friends to this day, as none of us live close enough anymore. But we did talk about it, we texted about it, we messaged about it, and we remember this messy but awesome game in all the ways that matter. Check out this transmission next to dive back into Star Wars lore.